What's up guys, and welcome to a hot summer's day here on the beach in Perth. You'll have to excuse if I'm looking a little bit shiny and my eyes are a bit squinty into the camera. Very hot day, very bright, very sunny, but hopefully the footage isn't too overexposed. So today's video might be a little bit longer than usual because we're going to be trying to do a long-term review of ownership for my 2007 Ford PJ Ranger. So I've seen other people do similar videos for their types of car, and I find that can be a really valuable source of information if you're looking to buy a similar car or you just want to see how your car compares to someone else's. Now, if you've watched the channel before, you'll know I've done a bunch of videos walking through all the mods and accessories I've done to both the Ranger and to the canopy on the back. So that's not what this video is about. Today we're talking about the core vehicle underneath, what it's like to live with on a daily basis, how the engine performs, what it's like to work on, how it goes on-road and off-road, creature comforts in the cab, and all that stuff. And if you're here for something in particular, here's all the things we're going to be covering in this video and some timestamps if you wanted to jump ahead. So starting with the general info, she's a 2007 Ford PJ Ranger with a 3-litre Ford duratorq engine under the bonnet. When these cars were brand new, they came out with 2 turbo diesel engine options. There was a 3-litre that's obviously in mine, or a slightly smaller 2.5 litre. Now, from everything I've read online, both those engines are extremely similar in terms of reliability and I don't know, just what they're like to live with on a daily basis. But of course, mine's a 3-litre, so that's the only one I can give you first-hand information on. I'm the second owner since new, and I bought her back in 2018 with around 95,000 kilometres on the clock. And I tell you what, she really was a testament to her previous owner because he kept her in really good condition, both inside and outside. That engine was meticulously maintained and drove like an absolute dream, and it presented pretty well from the outside as well. And you know what, 4 years later and an extra 100,000 kilometres on the clock, I still reckon she runs and drives pretty good. Anyway, let's get things started by talking about this engine. So let's talk about this power plant under the bonnet, which is currently coated in a nice layer of brown dust. So before I bought the Ranger, I did a ton of research on this Ford duratorq engine to see what I was getting myself in for. And you know what, for this era of car, so mid to late 2000s, the Ford duratorq engines actually had a really good reputation compared to what was in similar utes from a similar time. The only real known issue with them was that the EGR was known to fail, which can lead to some catastrophic failures and very expensive repairs. However, it is a relatively cheap and easy job to either blank or remove the EGR. However, I will just say to look into the legalities of doing that and make up your own mind on if that's something you want to do or not. So obviously I'm no mechanic and I don't want to give you guys any misinformation, so I can't really talk about the technical details of the engine, but from what I have done, it's always been a really easy engine to work on. Great access to everything you want to get in and fiddle with. All the filters are in nice logical positions. I actually did make a service guide on how to change the oil filter, fuel filter, air filter and all that. Oh, that's a sick buggy just went past. Long weekend, everyone's out and about having a play with their toys. Anyway, so check out that video in the description down below if you want to see what that service procedure looks like, but honestly, accessibility is pretty good in this engine. Personally, I do prefer the older, more basic engines because of course they are easier to work on without all that fancy modern age tech, but more than just that, it's just nice having a bit of extra room in the engine bay. Like chucking that second battery in was a piece of cake. Full-size four-wheel drive battery fitted in there super easy in a little spot in the corner there. And there's still tons of room left for, you know, secondary fuel filters, catch cans, pretty much anything you might want to strap onto the bonnet. Second turbocharger, just go nuts. And also with the slightly older technology, you don't have things like smart alternators, so you can just run a second battery off a basic isolator, which can save you a little bit of money. I was going to say that I've never really had many problems with sourcing parts for the engine or driveline, but just thinking about it now, I haven't really had to buy anything too crazy either, but general stuff, so belts, filters, uni joints, headlights, you know, your general stuff. I've never had any issues getting stuff from Veal, Automasters, not really Automasters, Autobarn, that's what I'm thinking of, Repco, super cheap, and all places like that. It's usually stocked and ready to go. I've generally kept it serviced by the logbook as far as I could. I think the logbook finished at around 160,000 kilometres. So since then, I've just been trying to keep up the same intervals as back when it was in logbook kilometres. So roughly every 10,000 Ks for a general service. Power-wise, I've been extremely happy with this engine. Honestly, like the only performance mod I've done is a remap, and even that was done like 3 years ago, about 80,000 kilometers ago. And man, it pulls hard. Like even with that canopy on the back, this thing absolutely flies. If your mates have got like, you know, Tritons, Navaras and Hiluxes from a similar era with similar mods, guarantee you the Ranger will blow them away, hands down. So the remap was, it was about 3 years ago, and that took the power from 105 horsepower at the wheels up to 160 at the wheels. Torque was up from 320 up to 420 Newton meters. And more than just the figures, like the way it delivers that power is fantastic. Always feels like there's power on tap when we need it, whether that's cruising up a heavy hill climb. Actually, I'll chuck the dyno chart up here too, so you can actually see those curves. But yeah, always power when you need it, whether you're overtaking, heading up a hill, whatnot, you've always got that power at your right foot. The thought did cross my mind when I had the remap done and all of a sudden gained heaps of extra power and torque, like, what's this gonna do to my poor factory clutch? Is it gonna wear out quickly, and am I gonna be up for a new clutch as well? But happy to report that 70 or 80,000 kilometers have happened since that remap was done, and I'm still going great on the factory clutch, which is now up to about 186,000 kilometers. And yeah, honestly, it feels like it's got heaps of life left in it. But I suppose I do try and drive pretty gently most of the time, so I'm sure that helps to prolong the life as well. While we're on the engine, let's talk fuel economy as well. So fully loaded for a trip away, she gets between 11.5 and 12 litres per 100 kilometres. And I reckon that's pretty reasonable given all that extra weight and wind resistance of the canopy on the back. The real problem with it, I reckon, is the fuel tank, because it's supposed to be a 70 litre tank, but the fuel light comes on at about 50 litres used, and that works out to about, I don't know, 420 or 430 kilometres. The light comes on and I've got to start looking for a fuel station. Now, theoretically, it's still got 20 litres left in the tank, and I could push it, and I have pushed it up to about 50 or 60 kilometers past that light coming on, but without knowing for sure, it's just not a gamble I like to take. As I mentioned, the maintenance schedule for these is pretty stock standard. General servicing every 10,000 kilometers. They like 5W30 engine oil. The sump is 7 litres, which is a bit of an annoying size, because either you buy a 5 litre and then 2 1 litres to create your 7 litres, or what I normally do is buy a 10 litre, put your 7 in, then you've got a bit left over for your next service. Timing belt is due at 120,000 kilometers, although if you look online, you'll find most people recommend getting them changed a little bit earlier just for safety, maybe around the 100,000 kilometer mark. Although I'm not sure how relevant that info is nowadays anyway, because I'd be astounded if you could pick one of these up with less than 100,000 kilometers on the clock. I think the only mechanical fault I've had in the past 90,000 kilometers was one of the injectors leaking, which of course meant I had to replace all 4 injectors, because you can't just replace one, unfortunately, and I think that cost me around $3,000 to have those 4 replaced, so that was a painful weekend, that's for sure. But touch wood, other than that, she's been pretty mechanically faultless, and you know what, like one mechanical issue in 90,000 kilometers is all right in my books. Next up, let's talk on-road performance, because let's be honest, as much as we'd all love to spend every day exploring four-wheel drive tracks, looking for awesome places to camp in the bush or on the beach, the reality is that most of the time you're cruising around town. So what's it like to live with on a daily basis when on the road? So starting off with the suspension setup, this is an IFS ute with torsion bars on the front and leafs on the rear. And anyone that knows four-wheel drives will know that that's not the most comfortable recipe out there. And yeah, it's not, it is a little bit bouncy, but I've spent a little bit of money upgrading the Ranger suspension. I've got Dobinson springs all around and Coney shocks, and that does make a difference and does definitely improve the overall on-road drivability. Yeah, it's still a little bit bouncy over speed bumps and potholes and things like that. Definitely a lot better than it used to be, but maybe also not as bad as you might imagine. Now, some of that is down to all the weight on the back end. So with leaf sprung four-wheel drives, the more weight you put over those leafs, the more comfortable they become. And that's definitely true with the 500 kilo canopy on the back. The flip side of that coin is when I lift the canopy off to use the Ranger as a flatbed ute. Oh man, so bouncy, it's ridiculous. Another benefit with the IFS utes is they do corner really flat. So if you like to take corners at dramatic speeds, then you'll definitely like that. As far as the brakes are concerned, we've got disc brakes up the front, drum brakes at the rear. It does have ABS, but even with that, I find the brakes are pretty poor, to be honest, and I'm always leaving like a way longer gap than normal on the road, just so if I need to brake in an emergency, I know I've got plenty of room to pull the Ranger up. In saying that, it's probably not a fair assessment because I think the front brakes at least are getting pretty close to needing replacement. And I've also got a 500 kilogram canopy on the back, and I'm trying to pull up all that extra weight with the factory brakes. So I'd say if you're looking at a Ranger and you wanted to set it up similar to mine with a big canopy on the back, I'd probably factor in the cost of upgrading the braking system. As far as driver aids are concerned, you get nothing. So no traction control and no stability control. To be honest, I find they just get in the way anyway, especially when you're off-road. And on-road, if you have chunky four-wheel drive tires, you really don't need traction control. The driveline is perfectly fine in getting the power from the engine to the road. Nothing really to remark on there. It is an open rear diff, so you don't get that extra traction of an LSD. So yeah, it gets the job done. I did recently have to replace all the uni joints in the rear drive shaft because the original ones were absolutely destroyed. I'll leave a link in the description down below to my video covering how to replace those uni joints if you're interested in seeing the procedure. But generally speaking, the driveline's pretty good. Steering wise, it handles pretty nice on the road, and after 15 years or so, there's little to no play in the steering wheel, which is great. And at least since I've owned the car, I haven't had to replace any components in the steering system. So no ball joints, nothing. Being an older car, there is a little bit of feedback that comes through the steering wheel when you're driving off-road. Some people like that, some people don't. It just comes down to personal preference. And as I mentioned, it's got plenty of power under the bonnet, so cruising at 110, climbing up hills and overtaking is no problem at all. So what about off-road performance? You might be thinking that with those torsion bars on the front, leaf springs on the rear and an open rear differential, that must just be a recipe for disaster off-road. But you know what? The Ranger constantly impresses me off-road. It is by far the best four-wheel drive I've ever owned for sand driving. This thing is just unboggable. You know what? That thing might beat it off-road. But this thing is just unboggable. I've had some pretty hectic four-wheel drives in the past. The Ranger beats them all. It's probably a combination of these awesome tires, the BFG KO2s, insane tires in the sand, but also all that canopy is pushing a lot of weight down on the rear, giving you a bit of extra traction in the sand. As far as flex is concerned, when it was stock standard, it was a bit of a error flex not found scenario. Just forget about it, no flex whatsoever. Since I've upgraded the springs to Dobinson and with those Coney shocks, it definitely has a lot more travel than before. The back end is actually pretty impressive. Like, I've watched some footage back of heading up some rutted out hills, and yeah, been pretty impressed with how well those back wheels articulate. The front ones do okay, but still lift pretty easy. And with that open rear differential, I do have to be pretty careful where I place my wheels on certain hills. Entry and exit angles are, yeah, not too bad. I mean, especially with this ARB bull bar on the front, the front entry angles are pretty good. The biggest limiting factor in the rear is that tow hitch that does sit pretty low. And then people like me go and whack a recovery hook in there as well, just making the situation even worse. In saying that, I never really get hung up on many obstacles, so it can't be that bad. And it's probably pretty par for the course for vehicles of this style. Factory standard, they come with 2 bash plates to protect all the important bits and pieces under the engine. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that I'm only running 1 bash plate at the moment because I sheared a bolt on my second one and it's just been an absolute nightmare to get out. So a bit of a work in progress, but yeah, factory standard, they come with 2 bash plates. I'm running 32-inch tires on the Ranger at the moment. I definitely wouldn't recommend going any bigger than that. Even the 32s, if I'm full lock and go over bumps, they do start to scrub. In saying that, it is nice having the little bit of extra ground clearance of the 32s. So yeah, I'd recommend going 32s, but no bigger. So how's cabin life in the Ranger? Is this somewhere you'd want to spend hours on end when you're driving to your favorite camping destination? To be honest, it's not too bad. Like, these seats are relatively comfortable. Certainly not the best on the market, that's for sure, but certainly not the worst either, and not the worst that I've sat on. My back is like quite bad. Like, I had an x-ray recently and it's kind of like a S shape, and yeah, as a result, I'm always getting terrible back pain, terrible neck pain, and all that horrible stuff. But I can comfortably drive the Ranger 3 or 4 or 5 hours or so, get out feeling pretty fresh at the other end. So to me, that's a pretty good example of how comfortable it is. In terms of fitting in the car, like physically fitting, I'm 6'2" tall, 184 centimeters, something around that. I fit perfectly fine with the seat in its absolute maximum backwards position. Yeah, really comfortable. You don't get a ton of adjustment in here, so the steering wheel can go down and then it can go back up again. That's about it. This driver's seat moves forward and backwards. The back obviously tilts back and forwards, but that's it. No lumbar support and also no height adjustment either. So if you're someone that needs those extra adjustments and like needs the steering wheel to come out towards you, keep that in mind that you don't really get those adjustments. But for me, it's perfectly fine. As far as creature comforts are concerned, we get power windows, power door mirrors, air conditioning, a stereo, and the factory stereo is horrific, just terrible, but very easy to replace. And I've actually did a video on how to replace the stereo in these cars, which I'll link in the description down below. In terms of general layout, I think it's a pretty nicely laid out interior. I have seen some pretty terrible ones over the years, so yeah, this one's not too bad. The dashboard looks nice and the arrangement of those instruments is quite logical in my opinion. I do like the fact this stereo is nice and high, like sometimes they're mounted a bit low, and yeah, it just makes it more usable in my opinion when it's mounted where it is in this one here. We get lots of storage options too, so down below that center area is a bit of a little storage cubby down here, which is surprisingly spacious. I've used it to mount my UHF radio up there, which then runs to the handpiece, which is mounted on the left-hand side. It doesn't seem to get in the way of everything, which is great. We get a twin storage system here with a, tiny little storage drawer on top, which is pretty much only good for, stickers and bits of paper and envelopes. Not too bad, the space of the glove box there. Then in the center, we have a center console with a little miniature storage section in the top, but then a larger storage section underneath. And it's really annoying, like if you have anything in these rear cup holders, the lid for the console hits and prevents it opening. But anyway, small things like that. Yeah, speaking of cup holders, this has so many cup holders. I've never been in a car that has this many cup holders. So in each door, we get one that's quite large, big enough for a large drink bottle. One of those per door. We then get two up the front here underneath this center console. We then get another one right in the middle, which is so annoying to clean. I hate this cup holder for cleaning. Like getting into these areas is an absolute nightmare, but it's super handy having a cup holder right in the middle there. Moving back behind that center console, as we mentioned earlier, there's two cup holders on the back. I guess they're for the back passengers, but also super easy to reach from the front as well. Cabin noise I find pretty good. It's a pretty nice quiet place to be for long drives. That being said, I am running those BFG KO2 tyres, which are extremely quiet on the road, and I've still got the factory exhaust on as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's not a lot of noise trying to come into the cab anyway, so of course it's going to be pretty quiet to some extent, and it might be a different story if you buy one, straight pipe the exhaust and chuck some massive muddies on it, then then a bit of noise might come through. It's also the most modern four-wheel drive I've ever owned, so I guess of course it's going to be the quietest for me, and it might be it might be a fair way off what a modern four-wheel drive sounds like nowadays, but at the end of the day, seems pretty fine to me. So of course, being a space cab, we technically get the back seats. I say technically because they're a little bit squeezy, and here's what they look like. A bit of a bench situation that also folds up if you prefer to use this space as a bit of additional storage. And that's, to be honest, that's what I use it for mainly in mine. Having the backwards rear doors makes the area really easy to access too, which is great when loading the car up for a camping trip. Space-wise, very, very squeezy. So as I said, I'm 6'2". Right now I'm fitting in quite comfortably, so you might be like, oh, that's fine. They're perfectly fine seat sizes. However, I've had to push this front seat quite a fair way forwards for me to fit in the back here. So you have to have quite a tiny person sitting in the front to allow the legroom that I've got right now. If I jump across behind the driver's seat, which is at its absolute maximum at this point in time, this is what it looks like. All right, I'm ready for my road trip. Buckle up and away we go. So as you can see, very, very squeezy, and it doesn't feel safe even to be in here for 5 minutes in this current position. So you'd really need two medium-sized people. So one to sit in the front with the seat pushed quite a fair way forward to allow legroom for the medium person in the back. So definitely would not recommend a space cab if you've got a family of 4 and you'll always be needing the back seats. They're more here as a bit of an emergency situation if you like desperately need to take more than just 2 people. Technically you've got the back seats to be able to do it in a space cab, but I would say they're mainly here for storage. Well, that was basically a long-winded way of saying that it's been a pretty positive experience owning the Ranger over the past 4 or so years. Every car has its drawbacks and the mighty Ranger is no exception, but honestly, for the price you pay for these things nowadays, they're a great, dependable 4-wheel drive that make a really good tourer. One thing I will also mention is that I get a lot of information from Facebook groups. There's quite a few on the PJ and PK Rangers. I'll link a few in the description down below that I rely on the most heavily. And yeah, they're just such a good resource that if you're wondering something, chances are someone else will have asked the question before. So dig through the old posts and chances are you'll find what you're looking for. Apart from that, thank you for watching the whole way through. If you've got any questions about Rangers in general or about mine in particular, feel free to comment down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. In the meantime, if you want to check out a full rig rundown of my particular Ranger, click here, or for something a bit different, click here instead. Thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you guys in the next one.